do not. All right, we are live, boys.
Good evening, Nathan. Brandon, how are you?
Well, and yourself?
Good.
Good.
I prefer men, Nathan.
Men.
Actually, I mean, it's just more masculine sounding than boys, but whatever.
I mean, Brandon, you and I are the size of large boys if we're being just really blunt here. So, although we are grown men.
I don't think we're going to be getting any bigger, not in the lineal sense anyways.
Maybe around the middle. Might happen. All right, so we'll wait for a few people to get joined on here. We've got, looks like our viewership is growing, which is great. So we always like putting there in the chat where you guys are watching from. So if you want to type in the state where you're watching, we'd appreciate seeing that. So I know that we've not done one of these in a while, and so thought it was good timing to go ahead and do another one as we head into winter, and a lot of new pigs on feed for a lot of different folks across the country. So we'll get started in just here a couple minutes. If you've not joined us on one of these before, we normally wait a couple minutes after just to make sure everybody gets the notification and gets logged on and checks us out. So Joey's watching in Mississippi. We've got Tony and Urbana. Appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind too, as you're watching, hit that share button for us so we can get this thing rolling.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Karen. Feels like it's been 100 years since we've seen you. Got Martin in South Texas, Susan in Manhattan, Kansas, Brittany in Florida. It's probably like 75 and perfect there. Tyler in Ohio, Jason in Pennsylvania, and Cole in Illinois. Appreciate you guys all tuning in. Casey checking us out. Pretty sure Casey's related to our newest teammate. We got Mark Ingram from Tennessee, Payne from Ohio. Payne's a dealer. Appreciate you, man. Marshall in Texas. Oh, Ella's watching from Illinois. That's good, Ben. Hey, this is great. We've got
at least I know she's doing her homework, correct? Yeah.
She better not be doing a little TikTok. All right, we've got Juan in Texas watching. Dustin Thornburg must be blind there, saying that we're studs, but we appreciate it. Jarrett in Indiana, Randy in Texas, thank you for tuning in. Shanna in SoCal, 75 degrees. Thank you. We appreciate that. Susan in Ohio, Ty in Indiana. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. So we're about to hit about 100 people watching. So we appreciate you guys tuning in here for us. So and again, if you don't have time or can't take notes as we go, don't worry, because this is being recorded. And as soon as we hit stop, this thing is recorded forever. And so you can go back and find it either on our Facebook page or by tomorrow. Sometime mid-morning, I'll have it up on the Sunglo Feeds YouTube channel. So if you've not checked out our YouTube channel, just search Sunglo Feeds on YouTube and subscribe. We'd appreciate that. It's got our whole library of videos are on there. So we've got tons of great content on there, and this will be another one to add to it. So tonight, it's myself, Nathan Day, alongside Brandon Yantis in the middle and Ben Bobell there on the end. Obviously, no strangers to the show pig world. We've all been with Sunglo a while, Ben and Brandon way longer than myself. But tonight we're going to talk about our Fab 5, and that's new terminology that we're starting to use around our 5 most popular G-line feeds. That would be the ground feeds that you see in the green bags. You know, when you go to shows and you see, or go to your feed dealer, or hopefully in your own barn, you see all those green bags. That's our G-line series. So ground, that's where the G part comes from. That's all ground feed. So we're going to be discussing Coast, Smooth, 16G, 18G, and 800. And we'll kind of I'll give you a little info as to how we're going to do that. So what we're going to do, we'll tee up each of them to Brandon and Ben, and we'll discuss what makes great candidates for those feeds, why those feeds are unique, either within our lineup or within the industry. And then we'll also pull up some real live examples of hogs that have had success at very high levels across the country and that were fed those specific feeds. So we won't waste much time. We hopefully will be on here for about an hour, and we will take questions. So if you've got questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go. But if we don't get to them in the chat right in the moment, we'll come back later at the end and answer them when we're finished presenting. So don't feel like you have to wait to ask your questions. Feel free to stick them in the chat whenever you'd like. So our whole goal here tonight is for you to leave more educated, more empowered, and able to take some of the things that we talk about this evening into your own barn and say, man, I can make some changes and I can improve based on what those guys said. So that's really what we're here to do, and hopefully have a little bit of fun too. So we'll get started here right away. So we'll jump right into Coast, which is the first feed that we'll be discussing tonight. And that feed is a 14% protein, 5.5% fat, and 0.86% lysine. So that's our lowest protein and lowest lysine option that we offer, and it's a pretty unique feed. And so we'll let Ben, if you want to go ahead and start chatting about Coast and what makes that such a unique tool in our toolbox.
Yeah, I'm sure can, Nathan. And again, excited to be here and talk about our Fab 5. It's terminology that we personally used in our barn over the last 6 months, and we thought as a team it'd be a good way to showcase the 5 feeds that we feel like you can utilize in your barn and get to where you want to be from a success standpoint. But to highlight Coast, I refer to it as the either get you out of the ditch or keep you out of the ditch feed. And when I say that, it's to me, it is the most forgiving feed we have. It works the best when fed to animals that have too much. When I say too much, I mean too much muscle, too much width. Maybe their muscle and their width is outgrowing their skeleton, and we need to slow them down in terms of development from a growth and width and muscle perspective. It allows that skeleton to get back in check. So I would tell you that the way that we recommend to feed that, the way that we feed that is when we have bears or gilts that are either eating 18G or 16G, they get to a point where they get too much of something, muscle, width, and their skeleton can't keep up. Coast is a great option to use throughout the feeding period when you feel like you want to tone one back. I think one misconception about Coast is that some people feel like because you're lowering the protein and lysine, it will help them get fatter. That is not the case with Coast. It will maintain flesh, but it will not get them fatter because it's not a high-fat 14 option. We'll talk about one of those that we've launched in the last 6 months that is very, very innovative, and we feel like it's going to be a great tool to use in the market. But that's how we utilize Coast, is to keep them out of the ditch or get them out of the ditch once they're in there, to tone back, relax their skeleton, allow them pigs to grow, and let really their maturity catch up with them from a skeleton standpoint. Another thing about Coast I think I'd add is that we don't feed it necessarily straight as an option all the time. It's a very good feed to blend with 16G or 18G in that growing period when you think, man, we just need to pull back a bit. Like, we don't want to go straight to Coast because feeding Coast, obviously with it being a 14%, you are going to lose some back shape with that particular feed. So I will tell people to maybe blend it with 16G, half and half, at first to see if you maybe get done and find the results that you wanted with that Coast feed. So half and half, Coast and 16G is honestly something we use a lot in our barn. Brandon, any options you'd like to share about Coast?
Yeah, and I would say a few things that are also nice to cover as areas maybe where we can on Coast. I think is an option where those animals have to have very real back shape and very real muscle out of their shoulder. Or another option to blend with may be putting a little game on with it to maintain some bulk and width right at the back of their shoulder while still managing hip and stifle width and some of those kind of things as well, if you need to jackpot on it. Another Another thing there is pound for pound, you're not going to get as much gain, and so that's really what allows the skeleton to kind of come together. So if you do need to put the brakes to one a little bit and minimize their stifle width, their hock width, and some of those things, just make sure that you maintain that right out of the back of their shoulder, because it's not quite as impressive there in relation to our other feeds.
Yeah, and we've got a really great example that I'm going to pull up here that was an animal that had a bunch of success on coast this summer. So this is the Poland Bear that was shown by the Jackman family to the champion CPS hog there at the show formerly known as World Pork Expo. I'm not even sure what it was called this summer, but that hog for a big portion of its life was on coast because he was so stout. And Ben, you know maybe a shot about this one too, coming from our good friend Rash there that raised him.
Yeah, I know. I talked to Rash on a very routinely basis, and we were talking actually in the last couple of days about feeding coast to certain pigs and how that worked in certain situations. And he used this Poland Bear that was, as Nathan said, was grand overall there at the National Junior Show, I believe is what they called it in Des Moines. And this one is one that just had very good natural muscle and width and shape, and quite honestly was very freakish for his breed from that perspective. And so he was able to, the Jackman family was able to feed him coast and keep his skeleton in check, and that allowed that bear to grow at the right rate. And obviously by the pictures and by the accolades, were very successful in July there in Des Moines.
Yeah, that was a very unique animal for sure. So that one was one of those that that had to be managed, and that we often refer to coast as the management feed, right? So that's been a really great option over the last few years in the Sunglo lineup. So we're right on time. If you guys are good on coast, we'll jump right to smooth. All right, so Smooth is the new feed that we launched May of this year. Of course, going into a pandemic, which is the perfect time to launch a brand new feed. But hey, it's paid off, and we have had just an unbelievable amount of success on this feed. I mean, dozens, if not hundreds, of champions have already been on Smooth in its short timeline, and I don't know if we've released a complete feed within the last 5 years that's been probably as popular right out the gate as what Smooth has. So we recognized that we had a gap in our lineup, and we took a long, hard look in the mirror, and knowing that the history of Sunglo and Aki and Provimi is very high nutrition and feeds that feed incredibly dense, and you're going to see more shape and more muscle out of the majority of our feeds than maybe some others. And we needed a feed that was going to help soften and give more belly and more flesh, and Smooth has been able to do that. It's a 15% protein, 7% fat, and 0.94 lysine feed. So Brandon, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, and this is, as Nathan said, it has more uniqueness in our complete feed offering, just in terms of how it's built at its base. And so, if you look at, I think the old concept as a 15 or an 18s and 18s and 18s, 16s, a 16 to 16 is kind of old way of thinking, because I think we can get to a different protein level sometimes by depending on what we put in it. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to feed as dense as something else. And so we took this product and went back to our base mix, and then we also offered actually some different amino acids in there that actually offset the visual appearance that you will get from just a lysine percentage. And so we looked at our amino acid ratio in this feed and made it different than what we have in some of our other offering out here. And so when you feed this feed at the same time, then we also added more fat and some different fat sources to it. And so this one offers a little more fiber, an increased fat level from multiple different fat sources, and an altered amino acid ratio. And the visual response that you get is, it is a far denser feed in terms of calories, and how it'll feed and lay on the animal in relation to Coast that we just talked about. It's a heavier feed at a pound of it. If you fill up a cup, I mean, it's a heavier feed. It's a denser feed, and you're going to get more gain on this particular product than what you would on Coast pound for pound. With the extra calories and stuff in it. I don't want to confuse a lot of people though. Is they won't get sloppy fat. They'll just blend up in a lot of areas. Their top line, if they need to get a little flesh everywhere behind their blade and their ham loin, back down low in their body, they will do that. But yet they still keep a pretty clean underline. I mean, they don't get really sloppy down their lower third, which I think is nice about the product. And yet you can take one that's maybe a little wider and siphon them up based on that amino acid ratio being a little bit cooler. So I would say if this feed really fits in animals that need the flesh, they need to smooth up in terms of their muscle tone, and they also need to maintain some bloom and some bulk. I think this one works very well. They will get increased body shape pretty quickly on this product, and we've used it to do that. We've actually used this on babies too, down in that 50, 60, 70 pound range that had plenty of shape, had plenty of muscle, and just needed to blend together everywhere, or get a little harder in their body or whatever. So a product that I like quite a bit, honestly. And I think in different ratios with other products, just like Ben had mentioned on Coast, you can do some smooth and 18 or 16 together if you feel like you need a little more shape, or you can do that. And another product that I think we're going to talk about here later on in the 800 together, and it works really good towards the end of their feeding phase. So I think a feed in our arsenal that we didn't have a more aggressive option to calm one down and get them softer and fatter without adding, a lot of sumo or limiting your complete feed and then increasing a lot of your fat. And this one's one I feel pretty comfortable pound for pound, fits the scenario very, very well.
Ben, your comments?
No, I would echo the same comments as Brandon. It's a very fun product to feed. You can see results with smooth. I agree with Brandon that it's a great product to blend with other feeds. I guess we recommend and we feed a lot of blends of these 5 diets, and that's why I think with these 5 diets you can hit most all scenarios, if not all of those. But I think what smooth does is it can add flesh and body in the right spots and smoothness. But in most cases, we did not get them too fat. It keeps our composition correct, which I think is very important as we move forward with I guess kind of where we're trending from that perspective and where we're at with maturity right now in show pigs. So it's a product that we personally think works very well. I think there's an example you wanted to share there, Nathan. This is a gilt that we raised that Drake Fletcher had shown this summer and was very successful at the jackpot level. And then our end goal with her was always Kansas City to show it to American Royal. And what's unique about her is that she was a gilt that always had good body lines in terms of proportionality. She just needed to chunk and smooth in the right places and keep her skeleton in check. She was always an edgy type of animal. And so this gilt that the Drake showed was on smooth, primarily straight smooth for the last 30 to 45 days. Prior to that, she was on half smooth and half 16 or half smooth and half coast for most of her life, starting in July, honestly. So here's an example of a gilt that we transitioned to smooth with coast at a slow rate, and then we just adjusted the level of smooth she ate depending on how and where she was putting that cover and that flesh and that body shape on. So that's an example, I guess, of a way you could use smooth to add body and just flesh and cover at a rate where you want to. But we just used 16G or coast in conjunction with it dictate how that happened. But again, we never had any, or we haven't heard of any cases of pigs backing off smooth. It's a product that's very palatable, and we had a lot of success with it, especially in a wet feeding type of scenario. Nathan, I don't know if you want to talk about how smooth works in coordination with other feeds, or we'll do that at the end with 800.
We had a double bin now.
Yeah.
Well, he's got the picture of the spot barrel up here, and
yeah, I wanted to show. Yeah, I wanted Brandon to go ahead and talk about his example here. Sorry, when I disappear like that, my audio gets cut off there. So
no, it's fine.
Yeah, Brandon, go ahead with the spot.
So this particular barrel actually was kind of gotten ready a couple different times, really. Was intended for a state fair pig, to be candid, and instead of going that route, we decided to go to Kansas City at the end of the day. So he would have been gotten ready with mostly 18 and 800 here for the July show where he was third overall. But I didn't have a picture of that one from Kansas City yet. But so we had to kind of come home and sit still and crash a little bit and not get him too big, candidly, to make Kansas City. And so we utilized smooth there in the last 2-3 weeks, really, because this one got incredible kind of hip and muscle from behind, and then needed to really bloom back up in his right in behind his shoulder and his forerib to make the show there in Kansas City again. Had all the capabilities of doing it, but that product really allowed us to be able to feed where we needed to feed and flesh back up at the right proportion without having to feed a whole bunch of fat and those kind of things too. So that was a fun one. That was good his whole life, and just really needed to come together at the right time in the end after we went through the kind of burn down and then feedback regimen.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for people to see that, and I think that's probably what makes smooth one of the most unique feeds that we have, is that you're able to use it in so many different scenarios. And I mean that feed can be utilized so many different ways. Barras, gilts, doesn't really matter. You can see success in there, and I think this is a feed that we can feel pretty confident telling people that if you do not have a bag of smooth in your barn, you probably need to grab some, because at some point in the feeding phase, you're going to be able to utilize it.
I would agree. And there are some cases that I think you could go on smooth straight and be there. On some of those gilts that genetically are really just hard bodied, harder muscled. That would be the feed in our lineup that I would have them on. And if you knew they were going to be 300 and some pounds before they hit maturity, then I would feel very comfortable feeding smooth at a 50, 60, 70 pound rate all the way to show, because you're not, I really don't think you're going to get them too greasy with that product. And those animals, I mean, quite frankly, you have to be pretty aggressive to try to get them fleshy enough to hit your target show date. So that product, I think, really does fit, hard crossbred gilts, or the pork expo, or whatever things are going to come out this summer. But the holdover crossbred gilts that are shown at every show, if you really have to sit down and then get them bloomy back in the right places, without, particularly if it's like a gilt that Ben just talked about there, that's on the edge a little bit, and you still need to get some bulk and some flesh and some bloom back in them, right in their forerib and behind their blade. That's a great product to do it with, without stressing anything else in their skeleton.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you guys look at the chat there? I know there's a couple questions on availability of Smooth. Smooth is available in Texas in most locations. If I'm not sure who said that, because since I got kicked off, I cannot see the chat anymore.
Yep.
But if you do have a question for availability, yeah, okay, Lance. If you have a question about availability, if you could send us a Facebook message, and we'll get you hooked up and make sure that that's available to you or your dealer, so you can get that. And I know that there's maybe a handful of spots in the country that Smooth is not available at yet, but it will be long term. So please have a little patience with us as we make that nationally available.
Yeah, got to remember. I mean, guys, Smooth's only been out 5 months, so I mean it's still very, very new in our lineup, and it's fun too to see some of these comments to largest game changer in our gilt program, hands down. I mean, that's awesome. That's exactly the feedback that we love to get, because like we said, I mean, we recognized and understood that we had to improve, and this is us listening to our customer base and doing our best to give them products that they can see success with. So appreciate, Adam, your comment there. So
hey,
okay.
Lance, Nathan, not to interrupt you, I see
Yep.
Lance, your comment, and that was a mistake at a Giddings. It will be available starting December, priceless. So apologize for that, and if you do need some help with that, please again reach out to us and we'll help you.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Okay, yeah, great conversation there around Smooth. I mean, that's one that we're definitely all still really fired up about, and will continue to be long term. All right, so 16G. So 16G is, that's one of our two, what we'll call flagships, right? So 16 and 18G, when you think of the Sunglo G line series, I think in a lot of people's minds, those are the first two feeds that really come to mind. And very, the nomenclature around the naming, 16G, 16% ground. That's what that stands for. No different than 18G, 18% ground. So 16G is a 16% protein, 5% fat, and 1% lysine feed. So Ben, go ahead and run with 16.
Yep. So I would say 16G is a staple, flagship, whatever you want to say about 16G. It's to me, it's a feed that I think really fits well with crossbred bears and gilts and purebreds that have enough muscle and are compositionally correct to feed in the growing phase and throughout. I think maybe one of the misnomers about 16G, or finisher as it's called in the pelleted form, is that you have to feed it after they're through their growing phase, where 18G is a very good feed to feed throughout. From 60 pounders to 300 pounders, 16G is a very good baseline. I would tell you that my recommendation would be, if you start a pig on 18 and then you go to 16 because maybe they had too much muscle on 18G, and 16G is allowing their skeleton to grow more correctly, there's not a reason why you can't stay on 16G the entire time. There's been a lot of cases where people have used that as their growing and finishing feed, and even shown them on 16G. If compositionally and with the correct amount of muscle they have that, there's no reason to switch them off of it. So I want people to realize that 16G is a feed that is so versatile and so dynamic that it can be fed at all different stages of production in that show pig's life.
Yeah, Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree completely. In fact, a lot of times, people will, like Ben said, think of something as a grower or finisher and try to kind of put them in buckets, and then they try to just feed by weight. And I honestly I don't like weights that people feel like they have to stay stuck with, because we don't really feed based on weights here. I mean, we feed based on what we need to look like, or the target that we're trying to hit at the very, very end of the day. And so I would say I probably prefer to feed Barras more. And so if I fed more gilts, and I'm sure I probably will, I've got two boys that I'm sure are probably going to want to show some gilts, we'll probably start on 16G on a lot of those gilts rather than than 18. You know, and I think both are good options. I mean, it's you know, you can feed them both to little ones, feed them both to big ones. I don't. It doesn't really matter a whole lot to me on there. And sometimes it depends on, I think, your feed intake and or if you're feeding anything else with it. I think is very important based on whether you're feeding 16 or 18.
All right, Ben, I'm going to pull up your example here of your Grand Bear from Illinois a couple years ago.
Yep. Nathan, I know that we've shared this example before in some of our dealer meetings, but a bear that Claire showed there a couple years ago that has some success. And what's interesting about him is that once he got through the baby pig phase, we put him on 16G and we never took him off of it. Quite honestly, the hog just grew very naturally on it. His skeleton stayed in check. From a looseness perspective, composition was always good on 16G. The one thing I would tell you about him is that he was never able to go to higher protein feeds of any kind because of where his rear feet hit the ground. He was a naturally wide constructed one, and we weren't able to go to 18G because of a fear of getting that hog out of check from behind. So we kept him on 16G. So that's an example of a pig that, you know, you want to do something with him because you like him in your barn and your daughter's proud of him, and you've jackpotted him a little bit with some success. But you really can't because you know you're doing the right thing for the animal. And I think Brandon mentioned, and I know that our discussion tonight is based around our 5-tab complete G-line feeds. But an example that I want to share about this barrow is that to keep that hog, to keep his edges the best that we could do at the end of the game and make sure that, you know, we didn't get too much neck and throat. Final Control was actually a product we used on him. A great deal there at the end, especially to keep him in check, because I knew that from a complete feed standpoint, he needed to stay on 16G to keep his rear leg in check, but to get an extra boost of protein to help with his just sharpness of back shape and to keep his throat and neck right at his cheek, we had some Final Control. So just wanted to share that. Sometimes when we get to that phase and those pigs look so good on a complete feed, I think the key is you don't need to change or reinvent the wheel, but maybe add a supplement here or there to tweak that look that you're going for and for that particular show.
I think another not to tell your secrets, but you've shared it on other Facebook Lives. But you know that this white bear, for example, not that we're going to spend a lot of time on supplements tonight. You know, he was never fed Paline, correct?
No, he never was. We couldn't risk it with the way he was made behind, and so and his growth curve was good from a size perspective, and so we never put him on Paline.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a perfect example of, you know, that hog was not fed certain feeds or certain supplements just to feed them. You know, he was fed honestly a pretty simple diet, and you know, you were able to just maximize his potential based on some simplicity around our lineup, which I think is pretty neat.
Well, I think something to mention, Nathan, and not to be sarcastic, but we have nutritionists that have built these diets, and they are way smarter than me or any of these people on the call. And I mean that they've you know, nutritionally made pig feed that's good. So you know, I tell a lot of people a lot of times, you know, the base feeds are good for a reason, and if you feed them, you're going to have success. I think it's important to read the pigs and think about their maturity, which is challenging for folks just getting started. But I think if you listen to our videos and think about it a little bit, as a pig gets out of check on 18G, the next natural step would be 16G or coast.
Yeah. Let's not overthink it, right? I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people, myself included. I mean, sometimes you go down there and you're like, all right, we need to throw the whole gamut to them, and maybe it's just you need to back off in some ways, or maybe you need to feed a little less feed. You know, maybe you just need to slow it down a little bit and just get back to basics. And so, I think really that's what makes this Fab 5, if you will, unique, is the fact that, you know, we've got diets that can fit basically 99% of the animals that are going to step into a show ring. And if you've got one that doesn't maybe fit, one of those 5 feeds, you've maybe got something that's completely next level, or maybe something that should never be shown. I don't know, one or the other. Not to sound cocky, but I think that we all are very confident in those 5 feeds, and you can see a lot of success from a base feed standpoint by starting with these 5 and then tweaking with supplements on top of. So let's jump right into 18G as the next logical step in our lineup. Brandon, if you want to go ahead and take this one.
Yeah, and I would say this is probably one that's a bigger staple and will be in our barn, particularly when we're feeding barras and purebred barras, especially, and some purebred gilts if they are of the genetic capability to stay more moderate and get fleshier and need to be more right compositionally, then this is one that we like to start on. And so particularly on some of those barrels, I mean, we'll limit feed a little bit more so, and that's why I brought up 18 and 16, depending on where you're needing to hit your total daily intake at. If you need to feed less feed, sometimes I like to have 18 in there because I can still get a similar grams per day of lysine, if you will, out of 2 pounds of 18 maybe versus 3 pounds of 16. And so a lot of times, and not to bring up a lot of supplements, but a lot of times this is an area where I will introduce a lot of full tank into some of those pigs, and that's where I'm able to minimize my actually pounds of our base feed, use some full tank, keep their body right, and I can still get the muscle, the shape that I'm wanting to, keep their composition on the leaner side from a maturity standpoint. And a lot of those animals we're looking to go to one show with. If it's your target is going to be Expo, or your target's going to be a state fair or something like that, I like to kind of be in charge of when some of those barrels are going to hit physiological maturity and turn into a couch potato. And so I prefer to start on an 18 on some of those, let them get up to a bigger weight, and then I can get them fat when I want to get them fat.
Ben, go ahead.
Anything that needs muscle. I mean, if you've got something that's greener in terms of muscle, I mean, there are some genetics in the crossbred lineup that are bigger bodied and they grow very fast and they're very dense in their forerib and their body cavity, and those animals that are naturally a little softer in their body, if they're safe enough from behind and those things, I mean, 18G is a great option for those animals. Anytime that you elevate your protein a little higher, they're naturally going to burn calories to get rid of extra protein, extra lysine. And so not saying this one does that, but I do feel that 18G in comparison to other 18% products on the market, we will keep a firmer, harder, more compositionally correct look right out of their shoulder. So if you need that, this is one that I feel pretty comfortable about pound for pound.
Yep, I agree, Brandon. I think situationally it's a great feed. We start every pig we buy on 18G, whether they're quite honestly, when we bring them home, everything goes on 18G. I don't care if they're skinnier or they have a lot of muscle, because I want to see what they do on 18G for a couple weeks. And I feel like you can get them out of the ditch if you do that, and we can keep them on it if they need to stay on it. I think it's a very good level set feed to start animals on, because nutritionally it's very fortified for a pig of that size when you get them home and start them on 18G. And I do think, like Brandon mentioned, if you do go to a lower protein in the feeding phase, going back to 18G is something that's good to do the last 30 days if you feel like you need more shape and muscle back in those animals. And quite honestly, if you don't want to go to a higher fat option, but you want to get those animals really genuine in terms of back shape, 18G can do that very well. So I think it's not only a good growing finishing feed, but it's also a situational feed that can be very beneficial in the end. And
especially if you don't necessarily know the the genetics that you're buying too. I mean, this is an area where if you go to sales and you don't exactly know what you're going to get yourself into, it'll allow you to stay on the right side of their maturity curve and not get them those products that we've got to break out of the. You mentioned Final Control earlier, and other ones, they're a little pricier than a bag 18G is too.
Yeah.
Looks like he's got your red bear up there.
Okay, I can't see the picture. My computer's slow. So a red bear that Ella showed a summer ago, I guess, pre-COVID, they're 19 in Illinois. And quite honestly, we kept him on 18G his entire life. He did get blended with some 800 at the end to give him the extra punch that he needed. But an example like Brandon shared earlier of a purebred pig that needed to stay consistent with that protein and lysine level to have enough muscle and punch. And he was one that could handle it from a skeleton standpoint. And I think what else that is good to mention is that we needed pounds. This hog was this barrel was only young. And got cut a little bit later in life due to just getting a slower start after we got him home. So he needed to grow as fast as we could get him to grow. And 18G is something that we've used at our house when we need to get them to continue to put on pounds in that feeding phase. And so as an example to share, this barrel was fed 18G his entire life. And even at the end when we mixed or fed him a half and half ration of 818, it still was, at least 50% of his feed diet was 18G.
And I would say that's another thing that that Ben talked about, and it's really great to note. If you need gain, you're going to get as much gain from 18 as you will any product in our lineup to still keep maximum intake and still keep going forward. So great option if you still need to grow if you're a little behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Brandon, I'll save your Chester example for when we start talking about blending them.
That's fine. It doesn't matter either way.
Yeah. All right. So again, 18G, if you need more muscle, you need to grow, that's your feed. Don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. It has been fed to literally thousands of champions over the last 15, almost 20 years probably. So do not be afraid of that feed, especially as you think about the trends that we're heading down in industry wide. I mean, we want them to look, a lot of times, we've got a few more minutes here. Brandon, a term that we use a lot that I want to take away any kind of confusion, I really want to clear it up is, what do you mean when you say this pig needs to be more compositionally correct, or our feeds will help maintain a more compositionally correct look as you study them from the side? I think that's a term that we use every now and then that I think is good to clarify for those that might not understand what you mean when you say that.
I think not only from the side, but also when you get right up on top of them too and behind their shoulder. So composition is relationship of muscle and fat. And so, the more compositionally correct look, we can have a firmer, trimmer kind of a look to their body line. They're not as sloppy when you get, right back in from their sheath or their underline, wherever in their lower body. They're not sloppy there. You get back in, and I know, Nathan, you love this term, but you get back in their crotch, and they have a firm shape to their crotch and their inner cheek, and those things back into their behind their forearm and right out of their shoulder. My kid loves some big ditches, and that's something that if you study them behind their shoulder and where they're at, but in all the places that are below their elbow pocket and down, it's all waste, and it's not going to give you more of a compositional correct look. So I do feel that, and I do feel that a lot of that is the density, and that's why I brought up earlier. I don't necessarily think that an 18 is an 18 is an 18. I would say that there's probably people that have fed 18 and said my pig's got a little too hard on it on our 18G, and we've all probably had that happen. Just depends on whether you still need to go show those animals right then, or if you're allowing them to stay a little hard for a bit for the end goal. And so I think a lot of times it depends on where your goal's set, because they can't always have every day be a good day. They all have bad days on occasion. And I'd prefer those bad days to be earlier in life and not at the end.
Yeah, thanks for talking about that. I mean, I think too, and then Ben, I want you to speak on this. Would you say that from a feeding standpoint that is one of the, if we're being, upfront about our lineup, that is an area in which we feel like we really excel, right? We don't make feeds that allow hogs to get to a point where they look sloppy from the side, where they look, wasty and non-compositionally correct. So Ben, touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I certainly can, Nathan, and I do agree with you. I think part of it is that, yes, our feed is very dense, but also with the way that it's nutritionally built, pigs are not going to eat 7 pounds of our feed. They're just not going to do it. They're going to eat a normal amount of feed. So you're not going to get the pig doesn't have the ability to eat 9 pounds of 18G. So then they won't get fat. So I would tell you that if you haven't fed Sunglo and you want to try it, just as you convert to that feed, be wary and aware that you may have to step down in protein quicker than what you might on another feed, because they will tend to really be good in terms of muscle and shape. Now, I'm not saying that our feed makes them too hard by any means, but what I'm saying is that comparatively to what you fed in the past, you may want to step your protein down a bit quicker, just so you can feel comfortable where you're at from a composition standpoint. And to echo what Brandon said, I think it's, as you watch shows or judge shows or your kids show or whatever the case is, if you watch a market hog show or breeding gill show today, it has become even harder to get pigs that are correct in their composition and be very high quality at the same time. And I think that becomes a challenge as we continue to move into 2020 and beyond, and to do that. So we feel like we're set up to help our customers be very successful with the feed we have, 18G and other products that can help that curve to help from a composition perspective.
Yeah, those are really good call outs. I just think it's important for us to continue to drive home the fact that, not all ground feeds are made the same, and not all percentages, as you read across tags, are made the same. Our feed is different, and our feed will help you get to the point that you need to get to. We can help you reach those points, help you get to the success that you're looking for, especially as we move forward. And, as we continue to make hogs, like we talk about, more compositionally correct, Sunglo is the right answer when it comes to that from a feed company standpoint. All right, so let's jump into 800. Which 800 is a very unique feed in our lineup. It's one that, from a timing standpoint, you can feed to smaller pigs that you're taking to a show or to a sale to try to sell. It can be fed to jackpot hogs. It can be fed to big ones in the end. One that's incredibly versatile. It's a 19% protein. That is it is basically a starter ration. 5.5% fat and 1.4% lysine. So Ben, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit more about 800, that'd be great.
Yep. So 800, and if those have been familiar with the Sunglo lineup for a long time, 800 would be an old Sunglo number from way back in the day. That was synonymous with a phase of baby pig feed, and quite honestly, it's been adapted over the years to be fed as a finishing feed as well. The one thing I want to talk about with 800 is that, and Nathan said it and really teed this up very well, is that it's a very flexible feed, and we feed it and others feed it throughout the feeding phase. It's not just for the last 2 weeks, and it's not just to get baby pigs sale ready. It is a feed that you can use at any point during the growing or finishing curve when you feel like you need to get extra shape and bulk. And I think that 800 is something that we've always fed at our house. We've always probably, I don't want to say always, but primarily it gets blended half and half with half 18 or half 16G. We very rarely go to straight 800 because I guess we try and get our pigs to a spot where we don't have to go straight 800 the last couple weeks, just from a wear and tear standpoint. And the one, I guess, really cool thing about 800, and I want to mention this now, Nathan, if that's okay, is that with the development of smooth, 800 and smooth is absolutely out of the park for us and for a lot of customers that we've talked to throughout the summer, and those that are looking for that feed that can give you the extra shape and mass you need, but get extra flesh and bulk in the center and lower part of their body. It's like nothing we fed at our farm, and it was something that we really needed in our lineup that we could recommend to our customers and to our feeders to get to that, I would say ideal type of market hog look or breeding gilt look. Half 800, half smooth, or any type of ratio of those two feeds is as good as we tried at our place.
Yeah, and I would say to echo that, the other thing that I'd like to talk a little bit here is we talk about 800. It's also just a series, and so really the 800 verbiage was really brought on recently because of the when we had 803 medicated with Mecadox. So if you have availability to get 803 in your area, it's the same diet. So if they don't have 800 available, they have 803, and it's not medicated with Mecadox, you don't have a 42-day withdrawal on you're pretty good there. I would echo those. I mean, we very rarely feed it straight either. It's typically going to be in a pound maybe, or 2 pound or 2.5 at most. It's basically going to be a quarter or half their diet is typically where we're at on 800, and we've used it a lot blended with 18 primarily, and this particular barrel would have been one that would have been on an 18 and 800 kind of combination. There towards the end, as the Expo deal got pushed back, and this one was really targeted to show the first part of June, not the first part of July, but we still got where we wanted to go there in terms of having that one looking the part and being ready to go, and 800 is something that this one would have been on 18G basically his whole life there until they needed to have some 800 blended in just to get a little extra maturity and a little bulk and spread. And the other thing I would mention on 800, not just on this particular pig, but on anything, if you're sitting there in the middle of end of June, the first part of July on some of those barras that are state fair pigs, and you need to get just another little punch out of them in terms of maturity and bulk and spread, that's a feed that's really good to go to because they will kind of man up on that and get some spread and get a little more burliness to them without having to increase their feed intake much. And so that's a very, very dense diet, pound for pound. If you would try to switch something from eating 5 pounds of 18G to 5 pounds of 800, they're probably going to back off the feed just a little bit based on not only the digestibility of it, but the density of that diet. As Nathan talked there earlier, and Ben both, it's a baby pig diet, and so it is within every bit of it. It is designed to be fed at a lower feed intake. So don't expect those animals to want to ratchet up on feed, particularly if you're blending in Game On and or anything else in with it from a calorie standpoint, because you will hit a wall in terms of feed intake at some particular juncture on 800. That's why we typically will blend together, with an 18 or 16 or smooth in that case. So
that's a great point, Brandon. That I would if you're feeding 18 or 16 at 5 pounds per day type of rate, and you go to part 800 or straight 800, they are not going to. It's very hard to get them to eat the same amount of feed, and it's okay. Because you're getting denser nutrition. So I always recommend to people to back off a little bit as you transition to that, and you should be in good shape.
Yeah, that's great. It's all really good information. We've got just a handful of minutes left here. I do want you folks here in the chat, I encourage you to ask some questions. I'm going to highlight Tony's question here about Game On. Ben, if you want to touch on that one.
Yeah, I can't specifically say that I've seen our customers that have used Game On to where it caused a fat pocket. And to be, I'll be honest, if I knew what caused that in pigs today, we would have come up with a supplement from a Sunglo perspective to sell, quite honestly, because even when you ask some of the best show pig vets in the business what causes that, they're not 100% sure. And, I don't know that it's nutrition-based, if it's health-based, what actually causes that. And I know that there's always been thoughts around added fat causing that in a diet. I can't tell you that I've ever seen or heard of Game On specifically causing swollen flanks or that swelling there in their lymph nodes per se. But again, I'm never say never in this business, because I can't say that a pig that's on Game On doesn't have those symptoms. I can't say that I've seen it cause it, Tony, and I'm certainly not trying to skirt around that question. I just personally haven't seen it. Brandon, any feedback you have on that one?
No, not necessarily, because I think there's a lot of factors: stress, environment, humidity, water intake. I think there's a lot of things that health, everything that can contribute to some of that too. And if you could get three vets or two to agree on it, I think that'd be great. But you can't. So everything that we do to them is at some point, if you're pushing too hard, there's going to be some stress. You overwork something, there's going to be some stress. I'm not going to say that it is incapable of helping with some, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's the creator by any means.
All right, so since we're about to wrap up our hour, folks, if you've got some questions, now would be the time. But at the same time, if you don't feel comfortable asking your question in the chat, don't feel like you can't reach out to any one of us or the rest of the Sunglo team, or shoot us a message there on Facebook. We'll get you in the right hands. So I do maybe want to take just a couple minutes, just real quickly, to discuss some of the combinations of smooth or 800, smooth and 18, just for a couple minutes, because I think it's important to note that we have this Fab 5, right? And we've got dozens of combinations across all three of them. Or all five of them that really can get you. Thanks, Kim. Yes, it is a word. It's right there in the middle of Ben's beard, his burliness. But we've got different combinations, and I think it's really important as a feed company for us to relay the message that choices are important, and it's important because no two pig is the same. No two feeding scenarios, even with litter mates, are going to be the same. So we have the lineup that can help get you to that point. So maybe just spend a minute, and then we've got some questions here in the chat that we can bring up.
I think I want to touch on, I think, Johnny's question there about 811 for the final push.
Yep.
So I don't think we mentioned that. Maybe Brandon did. I didn't. But 811 and 800 is the exact same nutrition or plane of nutrition. 811 just is medicated with Paline. And in most places, our manufacturers are no longer wanting to manufacture 800 with Paline. So our push is to go to 800. So Johnny, to answer your question, if you're wanting to feed 811 and you can no longer get it, or you still can get it, yes, our recommendation around 800 is the same with 811. If you can't get 811, for those that have fed 811, again, it's just 800 nutrition with Paline. You can feed 800 with Explode to get that 9 gram level that's in 811. That answers your question. If it doesn't, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, good question. Got another question here from Holly, and it gets kind of cut off there. When you have new families starting out with pigs, what would you suggest to those families the best starter feed for their county or state fair pigs? So the way that I would interpret this question would be, what are you feeding them as you're receiving them, right? As you're getting them in the barn, let's say they're 50, 60, 75 pounds, what are you starting them out on?
I mean, Ben kind of answered that a little bit earlier, that everything they bring in, go on 18. And I like to start there too. And some of it depends on maybe the breeds that you're bringing in, the sex, and some of those kind of things, and kind of give them a visual look. But, more times than not, if you have a high percentage of barrows, and that percentage is maybe heavier on the purebred side, I would for sure start on 800 or on 18G versus 16 myself personally. If you had some gilts that looked like they were going to be a little harder to flesh as big ones, then I would maybe think about 16. But if you're in a large pen setting or whatever, that you can't separate them out, then I would try to feed for the average, from that standpoint. But for the most part, we would go 18G to start out on.
All kinds of questions coming in. I love it. So we'll answer questions, guys. We're here to help you. So we will do our best to get to those. All right. So let me pull up the next one here from Adam. So Adam says, is there a supplement or feed that Sunglo makes that can help clean up the animal's neck or jowl? Ben, go ahead.
Final control. I love final control. It's in my opinion, one of our most versatile and best supplements we make. It is not going to change your pig's neck or throat overnight, but if you have patience and you start early enough, it's a great protein supplement to do that. If you get to a spot and you're like, man, we're like 2 weeks out and we're too fat and we need to burn some, the other option we would have would be Sunglo, which is a higher protein supplement that could work in that situation. But to answer your question, Adam, my go-to is final control. I try and, if I can see a pig pacing that way, we'll start 3 to 4 weeks out on final control to help burn excess fat. We don't start at a high amount, 2 to 4 ounces per feeding. The one thing to keep in mind about final control is that it will slow down their growth a little bit when you put it in the diet. So keep that in mind. So be cognizant that if you still need to gain a bunch of weight and feed final control and burn, it's a situation that gets a little tricky.
I agree.
Nathan, did we lose you?
And what is your?
There he is. There you are.
Okay. Yep. So we've got Rebecca's question up here. If you had enough time to not worry about gain, then what is your ultimate best choice for an amount of daily gain per day? Also, with the density of Sunglo, how much feed, not extras, so not supplements, do you feed per day? So two questions there.
I mean, there's a lot in there. Honestly, it's a very loaded question. And so I do think a lot of that,
right?
It's a great question. A lot of it's going to depend on what some of that animal's genetic capabilities are. I mean, there are some that, I mean, you could push the gas pedal down as far as you want to push it, and they're not going to ever gain more than 1.4 a day. That's just where they're at, 1.4 to 1.5. I think personally that a 1.5 is a pretty appropriate kind of gain. I think a lot of times when animals get up to a 2 or into that 2.1 is where you start really getting some issues, maybe from a skeletal standpoint, or things just are not jiving, or they're growing too much. And so yeah, it's okay to withstand some of that 2 pound a day gain when you get to the last week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on how that one needs to go. But I prefer, if I could have them all magical 1.4, I would have them all magical 1.4, because we can stay just a little bit better in terms of skeleton and structure, personally. And so, I talked a little bit earlier. I mean, we do a lot of minimizing feed intake, and so when we bring when we send stuff out or whatever to new homes, I mean, I like to keep things at a pretty low intake in terms of feed. So we may only feed 2 pounds of 18G a day on a baby pig, or maybe they're 1.5 pounds. And so I want them to get designed to get every kind of nutrition they can get out of a very, very small amount. And so basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to dictate their gut to not pass anything through, so that anytime I need to get an incremental change visually, I don't have to feed them another 3 pounds to get a visual change. So they're already kind of programmed to break stuff down and digest it extremely well. So I would tell you, typically on let's say a 50 to 70 pound pig, if you're over 3 pounds a day on intake on those pigs at that point in time, you're probably not helping to program them to digest and break down extremely well. At the same time, I very rarely have big ones eating over 6. I just can't ever get their intake to get over that. If we are, we're adding in a bunch of filler that they're not getting anything out of, and very minimal feed. So in terms of, I think I got most of that question. I believe.
I'm with Brandon. I can very rarely get them to eat more than 6 pounds a day, and I normally don't need to, because I think they waste it. And then I think 4 pounds is 4 pounds at that middle growing phase. It seems like to me is where we plateau a lot. And it's hard to get them over that 4 to 5 pounds. They really do well at 4 pounds to 4.5 pounds, but get them past that. It seems like to me that's where you don't need to maybe go as much. So I know that we've got a lot more questions here, so I'll let you keep going there on Nathan, or we can just start shouting them out, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I'll answer this question, Mark, and I don't know if you're referring to when I made the comment about 811. And I know that there's been some major changes around where paling's allowed, it's not allowed at different shows. We're doing some internal work on trying to be creative around maybe an additional supplement to add to our lineup that would not replace, because there's no one-to-one replacement for paling. There's just not.
No matter what.
Something that would.
No matter what any feed company can claim out there is no direct replacement to paling, period.
For ractopamine. Yes, there's no direct replacement for ractopamine. But I would say the combination of 800 and Final Control are 2 products that in combination work very well together to get added bulk and mass and shape when you can't feed paling.
Yeah, I think I'll take a little bit of this too. I think us as a feed company are set up as good as any across the country in terms of the different options that we have to try to basically mimic in some ways what you're trying to get out of paling. I know Brandon talks about this a lot. What's your goal with paling? Like some folks, their goal with paling is to gain better. Some folks, their goal is to mature a little quicker. Other folks, it's to get a little more muscle shape. So, or even burn a little bit of fat. So really, it's more so about what are you after specifically that Paline has done for you in the past or would do for you in this same feeding situation that we can then tailor through our supplement lineup the right answer for you. So be thinking about what you're looking for specifically when you go to feed Paline or cannot feed Paline any longer. All right, Jason's got a question here. For producers making their own mix beyond the beginning pigs and throughout, where could the 650 base mix be used to utilize some muscle dimension? Brandon.
Yep. So I'll take this one real quick. So Starter Base 650 is a product that we build for producers to use on farm or at feed mills to make baby pig feed. And there's a phase 1, a phase 2, and a phase 3 that those diets have been built and they're shared with those producers. So I would say that phase 2 or phase 3 would where you'd want to be at to feed the big hogs as well, to get more muscle dimension in that feeding period.
Yeah, you can on our website, if you go to sunglowfeeds.com and then you go under the 650 base mix tab, it has the different rations on there that talks about the different phases. It's a good question. Okay, so Michael Landry from down in Louisiana has a question. What is a good feed to use to jackpot now and keep it bulked up and keep her growing for a February show? This pig is at 145 now. 145 pounds. She's not at 145 on her maturity clock there.
Yeah, I would say the 800 series is a great tool to have in there, and depending on her body shape and flesh, I would be feeding that probably in a half and half rate with either 16 or smooth, maybe just depending on where she's at. If it's a pure gilt and body shape and those kind of things are pretty good and she naturally can flesh, you may even be at a half 18, half 800 or something like that, or 3/4 18, 1/4 800 in terms of a feed deal there. If she's a little harder bodied and you need to get a little flesh in there, but yeah, you don't want to get her too fat, you could even do a third of 16 smooth and 800. Honestly, would work pretty good in that ratio as well.
Yeah, good question. I mean, that's one of those situations that there's hundreds of feeders across the country that want to dual purpose their pigs, right? They want to make sure that they're competitive at the jackpots, but then at the same time, they've got an end target show that they want to make sure that they're at 12 o'clock for. Good question. All right, Caleb's got a question here. On smooth, is there such a thing as too early? Meaning, should you wait to introduce smooth once the animal reaches a certain weight? We all will say.
I don't really think so. Honestly, I fed some babies this fall just because I wanted to play around with it a little bit, and then some of those were on 18 or 16 also, in that same kind of stage and category. And man, they continue to hit another gear and bulk up, and it does exactly what they do. They smooth up. I mean, there were a couple of those gilts, honestly, that I tried it on that had lots of muscle and a lot of shape, and I mean, they really came together in a week's time. So I don't feel. I can tell you nutritionally, there is no concern at feeding that versus 18 or 16 or anything else. If you're going to go lower than 50-pound range, then you would probably want to have some sort of starter in with it or something else to blend in just from a maturity standpoint. But past that 50-pound range, at heart, from the base nutrition, it's the same at heart from a vitamin, trace mineral, fortification standpoint as all of our other feed. So there would be no concern about going too low of a weight.
And I think, too, to echo Brandon's point a little bit, smooth is so new that we're still continuing to find areas in which it really is pretty incredible. So don't feel like you can't experiment and play around and see where that feed can really have success in your barn, because that's how we all learn, is by playing and being the alchemists, if you will, a little bit, and experimenting in our barns. That's really where this thing gets fun. So Tony's got another question here. I know it depends on the hog, but how many days out is average for 800 and final control, it's like together, versus Paline to a targeted show to really max one out? So Tony, being a Buckeye over there, you're asking important questions in a state that's made some pretty tough Paline rules. So I understand what you're getting at here, and I think that these are very relevant questions.
Well, Nathan, if you can give me a definition of alchemist before I answer this question, and that's a little bit out of my vocabulary or normal verbiage. No, just have a little fun there. So I would tell you that I'm going to say 30 days. And it's all situational. And I know that we've talked a lot about situational feeding, but it seems like at 30 days out, we make that decision if we want to feed half 800 and half another feed they're on currently. And also at that point, we make a decision on where they're at in terms of muscle shape and composition. So I think that's a good spot to start adding final control in 800, especially when you know you don't have that crutch of Paline at the end. I mean, when we feed our bears in Illinois, when we still have a state fair, and hopefully we have one, but right now we can still feed Paline at this point. We know we have that crutch the last 14 days. So we probably at 30 days are not as worried about feeding 800, and final control is maybe you need to be when you don't have Explode or Paline. So I think that's the key thing to think about, and you really need to project those projects a little bit further than you have in the past because you don't have that crutch at the end. So my advice would be 30 days out. You need to be really hustling to get them on that program, so you make sure you got a bulk and just pop and shape at the end.
And I would say, we also like to try some things, in the middle part of growing phase 2 on some of those pigs. So maybe at 100, 150, 160 pounds too. We may introduce 800 for a certain period of time to get a little more bulk and spread, just to see how they're going to respond to it. Because if they respond very quickly, you may be able to back that closer to 2 weeks, depending on the animal. On where you're at, or if you can't stay on that dense of a nutrition for a 30-day time frame, it is going to depend on the animal. I'm with Ben. If you're going to use the final control there for shape, if they don't need shape, that might be a great time to introduce some game on, and then for sure. Also to get a little more bulk and spread on those. So depending on maybe like Nathan brought up earlier, what you're looking for out of the actual ractopamine product, we have a few other things in the arsenal that will help to facilitate that last final push without Paline.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm glad you brought up for sure. And we've still got, I don't care that we're over time, it doesn't matter. We still have 75 people that are watching here. So if you don't mind, touch a little bit, just briefly, on how you utilize for sure, the last 7 to 10 days.
Yeah. So on for sure, we feed that. We put it in the feed about 10 days out. We'll start a scoop in the feed morning and night is what we do, and kind of practice like you play. That's kind of where I feel that when we go to a show, we're not going to do something for the first time at the show. It's just not going to happen. So we're going to try all those products that we think we need to try at home to get that one right. We're going to try them at home, 30 days ahead of that or whatever. But when we go to the for sure, it's going to be 10 days out, scooping the feed each time we feed, so that we're not getting them addicted to that in the water, from that standpoint. And then when we get to the show, then we will transition to fluid at that point, and let them take it in, in water, and we will get quite a bit more response although that animal's already been, had that for sure product in their system. And I would say it's, some people think, well, that might be a little aggressive in terms of feeding an electrolyte or using an electrolyte for extended period of time, but it's really it's the safest electrolyte there is on the market, and it's really more of a nutritional supplement, honestly, for those animals. So you get more bulk and more spread, but you're not going to get the hard shape and the tying them down type effect that you'll see from some other products that are in that category. So we like to do it in the feed and then transition to the water, but that product, if you're needing more bulk, can work pretty well.
Thanks, Brandon. Pablo's got a good question here too. Chunky Bear, I got a February show. He's on 16G. How do we trim his jowl? Benjamin.
So I think a couple of different things here. If he's not too much from a muscle standpoint, you could transition him back to 18G. And I think maybe that could help with some composition there. But again, my go-to would be Final Control. You're quite a ways out from a February show, but maybe just putting 2 ounces per feeding or 4 ounces per feeding of Final Control in now would be a place I would start. And again, I'd also ask you where you're at on intake and growth. If you feel like you have plenty of room, or I guess what I'm saying is you're plenty big and you don't need to push, I would also maybe pull back consumption a bit, because you're a long ways out, and pigs, when they overeat, which they can put in fat deposits in the wrong areas. So maybe if you pull back his consumption a pinch, that's going to naturally help you clean him up when you're this far out from the February show. Pablo, good question.
All right, Tony's on fire with the good questions tonight here. Are you feeding for sure just on show day and night before in the water? Are you feeding for sure show day / night before in the water, or just water?
Oh, we'll do it. We will transition to we will transition to that point. Like when we get to a show, we may use a half a scoop in the feed, and then we'll do for sure in the water. So depending on whether we think they need to be on clear or just stay on for sure, then we'll put the for sure in the water, primarily at the show. Night before, morning of, just kind of keep it in them there from that standpoint. I mean, they'll just continue to bulk and build on where you are, because you will get way more hydration and way more bulk out of it when you have it in the water than it just being tied in the feed. But the really nice part about it being in the feed is you will get some 10-day time, that I was talking earlier. You will get some daily building up to it, but you have it in their system so that it's not like you I've used this analogy some before. It's not like you give a 3-year-old a pot of coffee for the first time when they go in the show ring. So you're kind of practicing like you play, and they're already used to it being in their system.
And I think too, for sure, is really good to mask chlorine water when you go to town to a pig show. I mean, whether you're on whatever water source you're on at home, pigs are used to it, right? So it's a different taste. Could be a different temperature. For sure, is a very good mask at the show. So if you feel like you don't need a lot of extra bulk, you can use a lower percentage of lower portion of for sure in your water to help mask that chlorine. I mean, pigs love it. I mean, they get to the point where they won't drink anything but it. So I just caution you, don't overuse it when you get too close to a show, but we always keep it in there. I mean, no doubt it's in the water all the time. So
yeah, that's one of those. If you ask the three of us or anyone on the Sunglo team, if we had to have a supplement in our show box on show day, there'd be 2 answers. There'd be more fill and there'd be for sure. I mean, those would be 2 go-tos across the board. It's not going to matter. We're going to have those in our tack pin because we know that we can make visible changes and changes for the better. So if there's no more questions, we'll kind of tie things up a little bit here. We appreciate you guys watching so much. I mean, this really means a lot. If like I said, if you've got more questions, we're here to help. I've also put in the chat our YouTube link, and so make sure you check out our YouTube channel. That's where all of our videos are libraried, and so you can go on there and check those things out. And we'll have this one on there by the morning. So if you didn't catch everything that was said, don't feel like you can't go back and take notes and rewatch it. And so make sure that you check out the rest of the videos we've got on there too, because we've had multiple other Facebook Lives where we touched on different topics and different supplements and feeds and all that kind of thing. So feel free to check it out. So we'll give George his little 3 seconds of fame here. Mr. Cooper wants to know if we have a supplement that can help generate more shag and show pigs. Go ahead. Any of you?
Hey, George, the best advice I could give to you, my friend, is Miss Hadley to get that brush working on the show pigs in Oklahoma, and make sure they're getting plenty of the brisk winter air as we move into the winter. But we don't have anything that's proven helping show pigs that help generate shag. In my opinion, shag is a lot genetics, and I think it's a lot of brushing and cold weather can help.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry.
Well,
didn't mean to bring you up all night, bud.
Yep. Now, if you do feed other species, if you feed sheep, goats, or cattle, and you need a little more shag, we do have a product called Epic that can help. That can help there, so be sure to check that out too. So again, thank you all so much for getting on here. This will be cataloged. You can go back and rewatch it as many times as you want. I'm sure we're going to have another one coming up here shortly. I think that the next Facebook Live that we're going to have is going to be around our fillers. So we're going to talk about the different filler products that we have. So we have probably the deepest lineup in the industry for one company in terms of the amount of filler products that we offer and how they're all different and how they work different. So appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Thank you so much. Our goal is for you to reach your goal. That's really what we're trying to do, and we want you to have success with Sunglo, because when you have success, we have success. So thank you so much, and we'll jump off.
Thank you.
Thank you.